all in. Okay. So, good evening. Thank you all for joining us. It's lovely to see some new faces or new names. And of course, lovely to be joined by the families and individuals that are regulars to our webinars. I'm thinking along the lines, this is about our 10th or 11th now in lockdown. So Sam and I have done lots of these together. This is the 5th with Marion. Marion Main has very kindly given us her time. For the benefit of the newcomers, I will actually just explain a little bit about where these webinars have come from. So Marion, I know you've heard this before, but I think it's really important that I share the reasons behind what we're doing. So as you all are, I'm sure, very aware, for some of us it's, you know, week 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 in lockdown. We've been here a long time, haven't we now? And it's been affecting our personal lives, our working lives, and our, you know, all aspects of our life so incredibly. Here at Action Duchenne, we very quickly turned on a sixpence and changed the way that we deliver our support to our families. We've not only has Sam been phoning families one-to-one, I think she's nearly 2/3 of the way through speaking to all the families in the UK. Yeah, brilliant. Also, we've launched these lovely webinars, which have been incredibly well received by everybody, and lots and lots of watch backs as well. We also have been regularly updating our advice pages specifically for Duchenne, with how COVID affects people with Duchenne as well. So for everybody, we are always here. We are always available. As you can see, we don't really tend to go to sleep. We're available at all times to have a chat, lend an ear, just give you some support, share information. So please do ask us if you need anything at all. Tonight, I am absolutely delighted to introduce the wonderful Marion Main again. Marion is lead physiotherapist at Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children in London, which is a neuromuscular centre of excellence. It's also world renowned, which means that we have one of the world's experts in our midst this evening. So tonight is Marion's penultimate session. For this first set of sessions, look out for further, which we'll hopefully be announcing. We also have loads and loads of webinars over the next few weeks coming up. We've got a webinar with Dr. Splints and his team in Alderhay, talking about how to make the most of your online appointments, which is very interesting. We also have how to find and retain work when you have Duchenne and have a disability, so that's really interesting. We've also got an adult living with Duchenne sharing his experiences in life, and we've got a few others up our sleeves as well. So this evening, I am recording the session to share with our community. Marion will cover a topic, I imagine, Marion, and then we'll pause and have a chat and perhaps have questions from the audience if you have any questions or want to share anything. If there is anything that you want to share privately, please message myself or Sam privately in the messaging facility. We are very happy to do that on an anonymous basis, so that you don't need to, share who it is that's obviously asking that question. I think that's it. We don't have to do about fire alarms because we're all in our own homes. So on that note,
say you won't get the fire alarms going off.
That's true, but we're all muted for our own safety, so it's okay. Marion, again, thank you. It's a delight having you here, so please, over to you.
Okay, tonight I particularly want to focus on parents. I have been doing this job 30 years. I have met thousands of parents, mums, dads, carers, and what I feel is a big problem is that we forget too often to look after our mums and dads. I do not believe I treat children, I treat families. And the most important people are mum and dad. And so often you put yourselves last. Everything is about the child. You end up in pain, you have battles, you have sleepless nights. And to be honest, it's not helpful. It's what you feel you should do. It's what you feel is the right thing. But ultimately, parents suffer. And when parents suffer, the children suffer as well. Even if you can't see it, the children know you are tired. The children know you are in pain. And then they will see that is their fault. And we need to work around this. We need to make it right, or as right as possible for everyone. So there's a few areas I want to talk about. I'm not pretending this is going to be easy. Many of you will say, but I can't do that, or I'm battling with this local authority or that wheelchair service, and I appreciate that. But we are here to help. We understand. And many of the physiotherapists at neuromuscular services can get things moving in a way that sometimes your local community teams can't. And certainly I do spend a lot of time writing letters in support of wheelchairs, housing, all sorts of things, because it's so important to get this all right together. So there are several areas, as I say, I want to talk about. And I think the first one is pain. And this is mum and dad pain. This is sore backs, shoulders, necks, doing things in. Now, some of you may or may not, during lockdown, have found some new sport, some new activity, you've sprained your ankles, you've got bad knees, you know you weren't very active before, but you've had plenty of time to do your Jack Wicks or whoever he's called, Joe Wicks, I don't know, is he the PE guy? However, you may have taken up a sport that wasn't right for you, you may already have had injuries before you started, you may find that tall parents are at risk, hypermobile parents are at risk, but you battle on regardless. And ultimately, and I know because I've done it, if you wreck your back when you're relatively young, it doesn't get better, it only gets worse. So we need to think about the lifting. We need to think about when it's necessary, when we should be trying to avoid it, the best ways that we should do it, because in theory, no physiotherapist is allowed to teach you to lift anymore. These are against manual handling regulations. So we don't teach you to lift, so you'll do it badly. And I can't accept that. We also end up in the situation whereby you don't necessarily have the right equipment. And that again becomes a big battle with local services. So the first thing we need to talk about is what we call the killer lifts. Those lifts that are going to do you the most damage. And those are what we call lift and twist. And the sort of lift that is one of the worst is in and out of a bath, because you're having to bend over the bath. You can't use your muscles effectively to support your lower trunk and spine. You're lifting out a wet child, so you don't really want to hug them to you, so you keep them sort of a little bit away because you don't want to end up soaked. They're slippery, you've got towels everywhere, and it really is, it's that awful situation where you pick them up and twist to get them out of the bath, and that is one of the three main killer lifts. So we need to be careful about how we are getting children particularly out of the bath. And there are simple things that your OT should be providing, something like a bath board which goes across the top of the bath so that you can at least get the child onto the bath board, sit them down, bring their legs over the side, and then stand them up if they can stand. So we need to make sure that with baths particularly, you are not putting a strain through your back. Really important. The next killer lift, as you will know, is in and out of the car seat. Now, the car seats that swivel and come forwards are exceptionally expensive. And there are very few grants or charities that will get you those car seats. One of the things that parents don't think about is that the child may actually be able to climb onto the car seat, the main seat of the car, and then into their car seat if they can get onto the car seat. There is no reason why you can't have a little step like you might have for the toilet in the car, so that they get into the car, climb onto the step, climb onto the seat, climb into their car seat to save you lifting them into the car seat, because again, it's forwards and twist. And that is a really bad lift, is into the car seat. Out is not so bad, they tend to slide out anyway. And again, for the boys who are having difficulty standing up, it's difficult to do it, but it's another killer lift you need to be aware of. And one of the last killer lifts is in and out of the wheelchair. So that when you're lifting somebody from a bed across into a wheelchair, particularly if the heights are different, again, it's lift and twist. You can use sliding boards, you can use swivel boards. There are many small pieces of equipment. You need to ask your OT to get you to help, because this is 2, 3, 4 times a day. It is going to hurt your back, and we need to try and prevent them. It takes a bit more time doing all this. It's a little bit more awkward, but we have to think for you long term. It's really, really important to start honestly thinking about your back, because I worked in spinal injuries when I was a young physio, thought nothing about it. You would get men of 6 foot tall, 2 physios. I'm Diddy. If you've ever seen me in real life, I am not big. And we used to lift these guys, paralyzed guys, on and off beds, in and out of wheelchairs. And I have totally wrecked my back, and I suffer for it now. So you are doing the same sort of thing, lifting heavy children, often on your own. You will get long-term back problems. Even if you do yoga, all the mums say, oh, but I do yoga, I do Pilates. It doesn't stop you injuring yourself. And the last dangerous lift, which is not a killer lift, but it's dangerous, is the up and down stairs. Many of you are thinking, oh, but I have no choice, we can't. And I know lockdown has caused a big problem, because house adaptations changes. You don't see an OT, you didn't see one before, you're certainly not seeing one now. It has caused problems. But we need to think very, very carefully when we are carrying children, particularly upstairs. Down's often a bit easier, they can come down on their bottom. We need to be aware that you can really injure both of you carrying up and down stairs. Okay, so that is not a thing that is easy to solve. The sort of equipment that you will use, the sort of equipment that you need are adaptations, lifts, whatever. And while we're talking about lifting and stairs, I want you to consider carefully, when you are offered a stair lift, whether that is a useful piece of equipment. It's going to be temporary. There are 2 main problems with a stair lift. You have to lift the child on at the bottom, and you have to lift the child off, often at the top. And while they are still ambulant, that may not be a problem. But if they are struggling to walk, then when you get to the top, you're going to have a second wheelchair up there to then get them around. And I will say, beware to all parents where the local authority have offered a stair lift. Because if you have a stair lift, which then becomes obsolete because it cannot be used, or you have a downstairs adaptations, or you move, the cost of putting in that stair lift in many situations is taken off the total that they will give you for other adaptations. So if you spend £3,000 to £5,000 on having a stair lift put in, when it comes to having a downstairs room built or a through floor lift and adaptations, they will take that money from the overall grant because you've already had that money. So you need to check if they're going to put in a stair lift, if it works for you. You need to ask them what the financial situation would be if they then need to take it out and make changes, or if you move within the same borough. But generally, we try and avoid parents having stair lifts for those reasons, as I say, is that you need to be lifted on at the bottom, you need to be lifted off at the top. It may not be solving as many problems as you think. So those are some of the lifts that we need to avoid. Lifting up into standing. We're sitting on the settee, it's quite low, it's very squishy. What you may need to do is stop and think, do I need to lift my young man off the settee, or can he roll himself over so that he's on his front, slide his legs off and push himself up into standing? Should I be encouraging that instead of just lifting him straight out? Two reasons to think about that sort of transfer. Same as off the bed. Should I let them go towards their tummy and push up? Because it's good exercise for their shoulders, really good. Anything where they're having to push is working those shoulders that don't get a lot of exercise, and it is saving my back. So don't just automatically go to lift. Mummy, lift me up. Daddy, lift me up. Can we try and break this cycle? Fine if they can't do it. I accept. I am not making any child do something they cannot do. Absolutely not. But if they can do it, I am saving my back and I am giving them an opportunity to exercise. Physio without even knowing you're doing it. How amazing is that? The same is the lying to sitting for some of the older boys. Some of the older boys will come to us, they'll be lying on the plinths, the beds, and say, Mummy, sit me up, to which my answer is, if you want to sit up, sit yourself up. Now, these are boys I know who can do it. Because what I will do is I will check that before I tell them they have to. But so quickly do you jump in and do it for them. Again, doesn't do your back any good, and it takes away an opportunity for them to exercise their arms and their trunk. So two problems, your back, their exercise. Simple little things, getting up from the settee or the bed, getting themselves from lying to sitting. This is physio. You don't need a great long string of exercise programs. Allow, make, whatever you want to say, make them do more for themselves, and you are doing their physio and they don't even know they're doing it. Okay, so that's all I want to talk about is pain in terms of lifting and handling. Now, this is parent pain. I am not talking about children pain. I am talking tonight about parents. I don't mind answering questions on other things, but I am talking about parents. Sam, Lynette, I don't know if there's any questions coming yet.
We haven't yet, so I was just trying to find my unmute. We're good. You carry on, Marion. Thank you.
Okay, so the next thing I want to go to is sleep. If you do not get a good night's sleep, and I know lockdown again is a different situation because it's much easier to sleep during the day, but that gets into bad habits. But if you are having a sleepless night because your child is awake for whatever reason, it does not make you a happy bunny in the morning. It doesn't make them a happy bunny in the morning either. Now that's fine in lockdown. You stay in bed a little bit longer, you have a kip in the afternoon, you fall asleep on the settee, fine. But in a normal working day, when Fred has to get up to go to school, you have to get up to go to work, you have a day in front of you where you start tired, it's not going to work. The main areas for lack of sleep, little boys, is night splints or cramp. The bigger boys find it harder to turn over in bed. And the very big boys, obviously, will be uncomfortable, some of them are in bed at night because of their contractures and their position. So we need to think about a good night's sleep. If parents say to me that by wearing the night splints the child does not sleep, then we have to balance the value of the night splints with the value of a good night's sleep. So we have to be flexible as physiotherapists. My team and I will try every combination of different ways of wearing splints that will make the boys sleep. Now, I should somewhere have a night splint. I'm just looking around. I've got one somewhere. Night splints should be plain, unlined splints set at 90 degrees. If the boys can achieve 90 degrees, they should not be stretching splints. They should not have straps at the side. They should not try and pull the foot up at sleeping at night in bed. They should be comfortable. They should not leave red marks. They should not be too small, too big to be useful. As I say, they shouldn't be stretching splints, and they should allow the boys as much mobility as they can possibly have in bed at night. Sometimes we find that by wearing two splints, it means it's harder for them to roll or turn. And so one night, one the next night might be a solution to just wear them for part of the night. Many parents say that they'll put them on when the child goes to bed, and then 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, they hear this thump, thump as the splints go flying across the room. Fine. If they've managed 3 or 4 hours, it's still better than nothing. And again, if it means that you're not having to get up in the night to try and put them back on or battle with them about them, absolutely fine. It's a battle we don't need, because as I say, if it means a sleepless night, we have to find another way of doing this. It's not about making life unbearable. It's about making it better, not worse. So that's the little boys, and often it's the night splints. And we'll talk about battles later, because night splints can be a battle, and it shouldn't be. If we start early enough and we get it right and they're comfortable, night splints should not be a battle.
Marion, may I interject there slightly with a question which is appropriate?
Yes.
We've had a question, a child with hypermobility, should they be wearing night splints?
Being hypermobile, usually we would say not. But one of the problems we have with hypermobility is that, as I was talking about before, there are two main joints in the ankle. The ankle itself only moves the foot up and down. Sorry, I've just got Ike here. So the ankle just moves the foot up and down. Under the ankle, there is another joint. It has nothing to do with the up-down movement. It is the in-out movement of the heel. It's the wiggle of the heel. And that wiggle of the heel is a separate joint called the subtalar joint. And that joint may be the only one that's hypermobile. With the heel wibbling in and out, the ankle may still be a little bit tight. The tendon at the back may still be a little bit tight. So you need a good physiotherapy assessment to ensure that even though you have hypermobility, you have the flattest feet on earth that look like Yeti feet, that there is still good range of movement and the foot comes up high. Now, some of the hypermobile children, you can virtually get their foot on their shin. And no, you don't need a night splint. The whole point of the night splint is to keep the foot in a good position at night and not let it point down. But a hypermobile foot is fine. Important that hypermobile feet can still get tight eventually. So it's just a case of keeping an eye on them, but generally we do not splint hypermobile ankles at night in bed. Does that answer the question?
I think so.
Any more?
There is actually, there's a very nice and detailed one. So I'm just going to read it through. So Tracy says, her son turned 10 on the 3rd of March. He had a stair lift installed on the 31st of March. They looked at stair lifts last November, and they're going to do do the stair lift ourselves, and then had the OT come out and they were assessed, and it was agreed just before Christmas. They had to up the ante at the end of January, as the local council weren't going to order until the start of the next financial year. So their neurologist at Sick Kids wrote a letter about in support, and it was ordered in February and installed 31st of March during lockdown. So they're in a period property with 2 flights of stairs. The benefit was instant, and they want to reduce fatigue and wear and tear for their son, obviously to preserve muscle function as long as possible. Her son is still ambulant, although mainly toe walks now. Does Marion know if councils in Scotland deduct the value of stair lifts from future adaptations, or is this something that happens in England? Thank you, Tracy.
That you will have to ask your council yourself. It does happen in England, but it may not be the same in Scotland. Obviously, unfortunately, when we're talking about councils, it can be individual councils. It's not the same from council to council. So it could be one council in England and your neighbouring council doesn't do it. It's very, very variable. It depends on their budgets. It depends on the level of housing stock, because some of them will say, well, we won't do that because we can move you, or if it's a private accommodation, they will look and see, is there any point in doing that if you're thinking of building on an extension? So that it's very variable. Scotland, again, I'm sure that some councils are better than other councils. I mean, it's like wheelchair services. Some wheelchair services, you can ring them and you'll get something, and another one you'll ring 42 times and you're still waiting for an answer. So it's very, very individual, but I would say that I would ask the council. Now, there's an interesting thing that you've said there, that your young man is 10 and you want to preserve function as long as possible, and I totally agree with that. But what I would also say is that we need as parents to be thinking, and I was going to come on to this with housing issues anyway, we need to think younger about what we are doing around the house. A lot of parents resist putting adaptations in too young. They won't go upstairs. We don't need it. It might not be necessary. We may want to move. We need to think about these adaptations. They're not quick to arrive. They're not always easy to decide. It may be that you don't want to start talking about adaptations when a child is 5 or 6. But the question has to be, why not? Why are we not planning earlier? We know the natural history of Duchenne. We know this is a progressive disorder. We don't know exactly when every child is going to struggle, but we do know it's progressive. Every council, every child neurologist, not necessarily muscle specialist, every pediatric physiotherapist and OT knows that Duchenne is a progressive condition. So there is no excuse at 5, 6, 7 years old, while they're still quite ambulant, saying, well, let's put it off. We know the diagnosis. We know what will happen. Let's put things in place. It does not mean your child will no longer do stairs. We have had boys who've had downstairs extension and their computer is still upstairs in the bedroom they used to use, because if you want to use your computer, you go upstairs and you play upstairs. And parents will do that, not only because it sounds cruel, but because their grandparents live up a set of stairs. Their friends have stairs. So that if you stop them doing stairs quite young, it does mean that when they need to do stairs, they may have got out of the habit and find it too difficult. But we need to start thinking about things younger. I accept when a child is walking on their toes and is struggling, we want to conserve their energy. But we also have to think, how long is it going to last that they are still on their feet, that things are getting more difficult. So stair lifts are fine. I'm not saying don't use a stair lift. What I am saying is you need to think about how long it's going to be useful, whether you are lifting on at the top and on at the bottom, and whether you then have to think that you need a second wheelchair upstairs because they're struggling once they get there. So you have to think about long term. We know where we are going with this. If you don't, or you're not sure where things are going, there are plenty of people. We've got Sam and Lynette sitting there. I'm sorry, I'm going to put this on them to give help and advice on housing, on adaptations. There is stuff out there. We need to think. We need to help you to get all this stuff in place as soon as possible, not waiting until it really becomes a struggle for everybody. And it's no fun for a 10 or 11-year-old boy to be carried up and down stairs. It's as scary for them as it is for you.
Marion, Tracy said that she's absolutely petrified to think about adaptations. And, you know, you have hit the nail on the head. Right in front of you, there's two people that have actually, Sam's completely renovated our whole house in the last 2 years. I've moved to get ground floor living. We've got two examples already that can help. We can help give advice and help and just support Tracy. So I'm sure Sam will add that to her list. And will you give Tracy a buzz? Yeah, thank you. If that's okay, Tracy. Thanks, Marion.
I accept that parents do put these things off. I accept that, but we need to get out of this mindset. We seriously need to get out of this mindset and get help earlier, make changes earlier. It is for everybody. It is for everybody. And you know, one of the things that this mum has said, it was instant improvement when the stair lift went in. The boys appreciate these things. They appreciate the downstairs accommodation. There is no boy that will stop doing the things he wants to do just because he's got a bedroom downstairs. If his mates all have bedrooms upstairs, he's going to struggle his best to get upstairs in their house or in his grandparents' house or even in a big sister or big brother's place. So that we need to think about the kids as well. Instant improvement. And having talked about that, we were talking about sleep. And I'm not sure how we've got onto this because we've got well away from sleep. But I'm going to move on to one other thing because housing adaptations are one of those things that parents do find difficult. So let's move on to the other thing probably they find one of the most difficult. That first wheelchair. How many people do not want their boy to use a wheelchair?
Marion, that's usually one of the key times that we support families in the early days. Obviously, after diagnosis, it's the first wheelchair appointment. And as a support team, that's always the first thing that we try and get a date for so that we can be there for that family on that time and on the run up to in helping to make the decision.
But as physios, we need to be there as well because we need to make sure, as Tracy said about the stairs, that we are conserving energy, that we are running around when we want to, that we are not being too fatigued, that we are able to keep up with our mates when we want to do it, that we can get about without feeling we're going to fall or we're going to struggle. There are many parents, and mostly it is fathers. You can throw things at me, I won't feel them from here. It is mostly fathers who resist that first wheelchair. It is less helpful for a boy to be in a buggy than it is in a wheelchair for three very important reasons. When you are in a buggy, there is absolutely no way on earth you can have independent mobility. You can't push the wheels, they're harder to get in and out of, and while parents see them as positives, it's not so much fun for the boys to look like grown-up babies. It's not what you want to hear, but they are not easy to get in and out of. They are not good for posture. Very few of these buggies have good supportive posture because wheelchair services do not supply the most expensive supportive buggies for this group of children. Those sorts of buggies are for the severe complex disorders, not just mobility aids. So the posture is often horrible in them. And while they are easy to pack up and throw in the boot, so is a lightweight wheelchair. Now, when fathers particularly say to me, but if I give them a wheelchair, they get a wheelchair, they will not want to walk. There is a very easy answer that I will say to them, so that if you're one of the Great Ormond Street kids out there, the parents of one of the Great Ormond Street kids, you will have heard this or you will hear it. Fathers say to me, I don't want them to have a wheelchair, they won't walk. The answer to that is, give me your car keys, because you do not walk when you can use the car. So let's take away your car because it stops you from walking, and then let's see how that works. Because it's the same thing. You need your car for mobility. They need their wheelchair for mobility. That does not mean to say you don't walk because you have a car, and that's the same for the boys. It does not mean they won't walk because they have a wheelchair. It means you have a useful piece of equipment for when you need that sort of mobility. So to fight the wheelchair is not necessarily helpful. By secondary school, any boy in a manual wheelchair should be thinking of an electric wheelchair for secondary school. A wheelchair where the seat goes up and down to allow them better reach, to allow them to speak face to face, to allow them to see things the rest of the class can see, to access shelves, to be on a par with other kids. Some wheelchair services say they cannot supply them. There are several things that we can do, and these you can do yourself. There is a little phrase we use in many of our letters. A simple little phrase that says, as their peers do. In other words, if you are not going to allow my son to function as his peers do, you are basically discriminating against him. As his peers do. Simple little phrase you can add into your letters to councils, to wheelchair services, to help them understand that your boy has every right to access, to function, to be as independent as his peers can. And this is something we use a lot. And the word access and full access. Risk of injury is another one of our favourites, particularly when it comes to stairs and we're writing letters that will go to OTs. At risk of injury. Sometimes we will write at severe risk of injury for parent and child. In other words, we have told you these families are at risk. Now you know. Do not say you were not aware. What are you going to do about it? But as I say, when it comes to wheelchairs or access, those little words, as their peers do, are basically saying they have every right to this. Any more questions before we move on from wheelchairs?
So, Tracy just added to say, yeah, that her son's had his measurements taken by the physio pre-lockdown for a manual wheelchair, not referred yet, but also she agrees that dads struggle more than mums. And I just reassured her, Sam and I will help her moving forward. Ruth has said, at what age should he stop using a pushchair and have availability of a wheelchair? I think you've pretty much covered that because it's not really an age thing, would you say? Is it more?
Well, we usually not want a child going to school, so 4 or 5 years old in a pushchair. The little folding wheelchairs are as easy to throw into a boot. It gives the child some independent mobility. They should all be self-propelling unless the child has severe needs that make it dangerous for them to self-propel, so that they should be self-propelling. It gives them some arm exercise while they're sitting there. Generally, their posture is much better in a wheelchair than a buggy. And ideally, as I say, it is much nicer to go to school with a wheelchair, because it then starts already explaining to other children, my legs aren't quite as good as yours, And I use this just to get around a little bit, rather than a pitching up in a buggy and thinking, why is that child in a buggy? Why is my friend in a buggy? He's not a baby, he's a big boy. So we need to make people understand that this is a mobility aid. It's not a brain aid. It's not a I'm silly aid. This is merely, my legs are not quite as able as yours are. So there are times when I will be tired. There are times when I might fall, particularly if I'm going through a growth spurt, when I just might need a set of wheels. But if you're very lucky and you're very good, I might let you jump on and have a ride.
And actually, that's a really interesting point. I remember Sam once saying to me when it was Samson's first wheelchair appointment, she said, oh yeah, when we came back, we were going up and down the street. And actually, as in her eldest son was, and sometimes it's just about bringing the comedy aspect in, isn't it, as well, to actually have a laugh and, you know, to let the older siblings have a go and just to not make it a big deal. Yeah.
Okay.
No more questions from this side.
Okay. Let's go back to sleep then. Let's please go back to sleep then. Okay. So we've got past the night splints being a cause for lack of sleep. When the boys are starting to get a bit bigger, it's turning in bed at night, or it can't sit themselves up and you've got to get up and sit them up. This is when we start with the profiling beds. Admittedly, big bedroom, big bed, bit of a pain, you may not want it. Again, it may be the OT. In some areas, it's the GP. This is seen as a nursing service. It's very variable, but we should be thinking when the boys are struggling, particularly with maybe lying to sitting or struggling to roll over in bed, struggling to get out of bed, that we need the profiling beds. Again, you may not think that that's a good idea. You may be jealous and want one yourself. But generally, we need to start thinking equipment. Again, it's good for your back and it may be what they need. Now, on the one hand, I've said make them exercise, but then we have to appreciate there comes a time when that isn't the best option and we have to put something else in place. Because it's a progressive condition, we need to think stage by stage by stage. We need to anticipate certain things. We need to anticipate the wheelchair. We need to anticipate the housing adaptations. We need to anticipate tightness in the ankles, the hips and the fingers. We know they happen. But sometimes we have to change our plans and say, right, this was right for you then. This is what we need now. Things are changing. Not negative. It's not your fault. Nobody's to blame, but things are changing. We all get older. We all get slower. Things change. And we have to make adaptations for our lives for that. And then the last group of boys who don't sleep are the bigger boys, particularly those who have lower limb contractures. And the worst one of those contractures is the Itb contractures, the contracture of the fibrous band that goes down the outside of the legs. So basically, you're lying in bed at night and all the legs want to do is fall out into that frog position. And that can make sleeping hard unless the boys are happy to lie side to side. But for the boys who lie on their backs to sleep, sometimes for those legs falling out can be quite uncomfortable. Then we have to think about sleep systems. Now, generally sleep systems are the favorite of OTs, but not always the favorite of families for two reasons. Not all of them, the boys want to be kept in one position at night in bed. But the other thing is, if you then do want to change, a sleep system can be a bit of a palaver to change all the pieces around. And there are some very easy pieces of equipment that can be used in bed at night to make the boys more comfortable. There's something called a T-roll, which is a big roll with a piece sticking out so it looks like a letter T. Their legs can go over that, and that stops them rolling out, takes the pressure off their feet. There are E-rolls. Now, E-rolls is something in a letter E, so it basically means it's two compartments. It doesn't come up to the body. It just keeps the legs from falling out. Those are available. They're E-rolls. There's several different types of leg blocks that are quite comfortable, that can go in bed at night, much easier to manage than a full sleep system. So again, you need to speak to your OT or whoever supplies your home equipment to look at comfort at night in bed, because a good night's sleep is really important for everyone. Seriously, really important for everyone. Because if you feel like a zombie as a parent, it's much, much harder to function. And if you're feeling upset and emotional, being tired does not make that better. And if you're the sort of parent who really resists getting angry or crying in front of your children, again, being tired does not help. It makes coping extremely difficult. And we have enough to cope with generally in our lives. We don't have to add any more stresses and strains. There are plenty. We know that. And if you're wondering whether I know, yes, I have a son with a severe medical condition. It's not Duchenne. But believe me, there are still stresses and strains with every parent who has a child. Children are horrible at the best of times. And if you've got a teenager, well, that's a stress and strain in itself. But then when you add all the other things on top, then there are real, it challenges your coping mechanisms. So sleep is really important. The last thing I really want to discuss, and I think this might bring up a few more questions, is battles. Battling over physio, battling over the night splints, battling over the exercises, battling over so many things that we used to say to parents, here's your diagnosis, here's your brick wall, go bang your head. Because sometimes you just wonder how many battles you can have in a day and how many times can you give up or give in. One of the things we have got to impress upon the boys as physios, as professionals, as people who want them to comply with exercise in a positive and fun way, is that winning battles for the children is not winning anything. It's merely winning the battle, but it's losing the war. If I win a battle with my mummy that I don't want to wear my night splints, what have I actually won? I have won the right to have tighter feet. If I win the battle over stretches, I have merely won the battle and the right to have tighter joints. And we need to explain this as physios, not necessarily as parents, because parents, you know, as physios, we give you the stretches, we give you the exercises, we ask you to do them. We don't think about the stresses that causes. We don't think about the battles that then produces, although we do. And I think it's important to think we do honestly think about these things. I am very proud of my team that we do think parent friendly. It's all about making sure that we minimize the opportunity to fight over these things, because it's wearing and it's not, nobody wins. These are ultimately battles that nobody wins. We've got to impress upon the boys, or make it in such a way that the positives, the fun, the games, the activities don't seem quite so awful, and that it is a positive and sensible thing to do. Now I accept. I have been doing this a long, long time. I know we have a high number of boys with autistic spectrum disorders. We have some boys who have quite marked OCD, but everything is fine until their routine goes out of sync. We know not all the boys will comply, can comply, and it does not make life easier when we have battles. But parents, you need to be honest with your physios about these battles. You need to be honest about what you can cope with and what you want to do. It is very obvious when we get local physios ringing up saying, I saw Fred last week, he's coming to see you next week, Mummy rang up to say, would I remind her of the exercises and the stretches because she'd forgotten them since we saw them 6 months ago, and she wanted to sort of refresh so that when she comes to see you, she can tell you what she should be doing. It's not about that. It's about understanding what we are trying to achieve and why. We know that having tight ankles gets in the way of function. It is harder to get up from a chair, to get up from the floor, and to get upstairs when your ankles are tighter. We do not expect the boys to walk with their heels down. We know mechanically this is not necessarily the best way for them to walk. And it's not an issue of being up on your toes is bad. Any lady with a wardrobe full of new look shoes will tell you you can easily walk up on 6-inch heels with no difficulty at all. And I must admit to having more than a few glasses of wine and still being able to manage the 6-inch heels. So on that basis, walking on your toes is not the issue. What is the issue, and the ladies will agree to this one as well, is actually trying to stand still in these damned heels. Because walking is often easier than keeping still. Maybe that's the wine, I don't know. However, what's important is what they get in the way of. And you know that from your high heels, it's much harder to go upstairs. And you try getting up off the floor in these heels, you will kick the damn things off. So we know that it interferes with function. We know that boys who wear night splints more regularly will end up, when they are not walking, with a better foot posture. But once our boys stop walking or are really struggling with walking and spend a lot of time in the wheelchair, fine. We then suggest they wear their splints during the day, particularly for school, because it is a lot easier to have splints inside your shoes, tucked under your trousers, in school, where they're not getting in the way because you're not walking, you're not standing much, or even if you're standing still, they might be okay, to wear splints during the day. But we've got to get away from this idea of everything being a battle. You battle with the council, you battle with your own emotions, you battle with wheelchair services, you spend your lives battling. The last thing you want to do is battle with the kids. But then when you give in, you feel equally guilty. And the worst is when they make a thing about having won. So it's all a case of balance. We do not expect you to do an enormous, great long exercise stretching program. We are probably the worst unit in the world for giving out stretches. Firstly, we don't believe in what we call passive stretches. We don't believe in the up, down, up, down, up, down. We believe the boys need to be involved. We believe the only good stretches are when they're doing part of the work, if not all of the work. And so it has to be more than just, let's get this over and done with. But we do not stretch joints that don't need to be done. We gave up on iliotibial bands, ITBs, years and years ago. And when I was asked by our professor, why have I stopped stretching ITBs? I basically said, because it's like trying to stretch a piece of rope. ITBs, like ankles, get tight for a reason. And the best way to manage ITBs is with good sitting posture, with good wheelchair seats, with good positions at night in bed, with thinking about particularly the way we sit. And that's important, because when a boy stands up with his legs apart, as many of them do, and then start twisting in a bit and up on their toes, they're doing that to improve the stability of their pelvis. So when you understand the mechanics of Duchenne, you don't make battles that don't exist. You don't battle the boys and make life harder. So one of the biggest problems that we often face, that parents are being told to do things that actually don't work in Duchenne, that aren't right for Duchenne, that are cerebral palsy problems, or are just a lack of understanding of the mechanics. So we try not to set up battle situations. If we give stretches, it's because they're needed. Many of the younger boys have tightness of the hips, which people do not realize is there. People assume that hip tightness is a problem of non-ambulant or struggling boys. We have probably a high number of our small boys who have some tightness of the hips. Why? The simple reason is because these muscles at the front, the ones that pull the pelvis forwards, are by far stronger than the bum muscles at the back that pull the pelvis back. Now, many parents will have heard this because I have said this often at conference. Why do ladies have big butts? That's because this is the muscle that picks things up off the floor. This is why they struggle to stand up. But because this one is weak and this one is strong, it's going to pull you forward, and that's when they end up with that extra curvy posture in their back. So we can prevent some of that with hip stretches. And yes, we ask them to be done. Yes, we say in the morning before you get out of bed, and in the evening when you get into bed, to try and make it easier, rather than saying you need to do it at this time or that time. You're going to bed, you're in bed. It's not adding anything. It's like doing your ankle stretches when you're cleaning your teeth, or doing when you're little, pushing the broken down bus on the wall. That we have a picture on the wall of the bus that's broken down. You can be stretching your fingers and your ankles at the same time while playing a game. So we try and incorporate things that won't make life into a battle. And if it becomes a battle, you need to speak to your physio and say, this is not working for me and my family. We must be an incredibly scary bunch, and we probably are. I'm probably the most scary in my team, I admit. But I do find that parents do not question physios. They accept that what the physio has said is right. And it might be right for 3 or 4 boys they see, but it might not be right for your boy. The other thing about exercise programs is we do not give out bog standard. And I think Action Duchenne know that we won't give out bog standard because we're refusing to give out bog standard exercise books, because your boys are not bog standard. What works for your child is not necessarily what's needed for another child. You've got hypermobile ankles and feet. I don't need to stretch your feet. I had a young man many years ago who was doing 9 stretches every day and was hypermobile. He was bendy. We sent him home with 1 stretch because that was the only one that he needed. So giving out bog standard exercise programs, routine exercise programs, doesn't necessarily work for your child. Our team assess every boy individually, and each one will get the exercise or stretches that is right for them. Your child is unique. Just because he also has Duchenne the same as somebody else's child does not mean that what works for one works for another. Perhaps parents, as difficult as it may sound, you need to challenge your physios. You need to be honest about the children not wearing their night splints. We're perfectly aware that lots of children don't wear their night splints. Let's find another way of working around that. It's not a case of the physio is going to shout at you, the physio is going to have a battle with you. A sensible physio will try and work with you to see how we can put that right, to make the most. And if they won't wear their night splints for whatever reason, and as I say, many of the boys have autistic spectrum disorder and they really cannot cooperate with night splints, we have to think again. This is not about making you feel guilty for not doing it. This is about helping you to get it as good as we can make it for you and your child. It's not about battles. It's not about right or wrong. It's not about the physio says. It's about my child. And this is what we have to think about when we're working with our physio. And we as physios have to think about that when we're working with you. Have we opened some cans of worms here?
No comments from anybody.
Okay.
It's a really hard, I think we talked about this before, Marion. I think it is really hard. It is really hard to challenge people that you feel are the experts. And actually, when you do start to challenge them, I've done that recently. In the last week, actually sent my community physio these webinars on his recommendation, because I questioned the fact that he was giving Samson the wrong bedtime boots for Samson, and he was really appreciative of it.
I think it's not a case of challenging them. Let's put it in a different way. Let's look at working with them. Let's look at it as consensus. Let's look at it as, my child, you've given him some exercises, you know, Duchenne off the internet. There used to be an Australian program that in the early days of Action Duchenne were given out. And they had some of the weirdest stretches I have ever seen, including stretching the leg outwards into that sort of position, you know, into a sort of that thing here. And why, when that ITBs get tight anyway and you end up stuck in that position? So this was a really strange book, and we wouldn't give it out at all, for which I became the baddie, always. Fine. I will always justify what I'm doing, and if I'm wrong, I'm big enough and brave enough to say, sorry, I was wrong, let's change that. We don't do hamstring stretches. We never do hamstring stretches. We say this every conference. We say this to every parent. How many times have we had physios throwing rotten tomatoes verbally or otherwise in our direction because we say don't stretch their hamstrings? I will not change my mind until somebody proves that it is a waste of time and actually not in the boy's interest. If you've been given hamstring stretches, they have to justify why. Don't tell me their hamstrings are tight, because 99% of community physios don't even know what a tight hamstring is. If I ask a community physio what is a normal hamstring, there is an answer to that that is very simple. There is only one answer I will accept to the question, what is a normal length hamstring in a boy with Duchenne muscular dystrophy? And the answer to that is, how old is the child? It's the only answer that I want to hear from that question. How old is the child? Because when you are a baby, you can get your legs right up over your head, particularly if they're breech, they're worse, but you can. Your hamstring, your popliteal angle. This is your popliteal angle. You're up on lying on your back. Your ballet exercise. That is a 0 popliteal angle. You can get your leg completely straight and a bit beyond in this thing. That is your popliteal angle. You're virtually straight. You're virtually 0. 45 degrees. Is that a tight hamstring if you can't get it straight up in the air? At what age is that a tight hamstring? 45 degrees would be very tight at 5 years old, but at 10 years old, that's normal. So I need to know a lot more than just saying, but the child has a tight hamstring. The other thing being, why do the children have tight hamstrings? And this is a question that a lot of more physios have got to ask, and a lot more parents have got to ask, why? We don't ask why. It's like our hypermobile parents. When I say, does anybody actually ever tell you what hypermobility is? Oh yes, it's bendy joints. No, that's the result of hypermobility. Hypermobile is when you have too much elastin fibers, as I was saying. The question is, why do we not stretch hamstrings? Why are we not asking this child to do the X, Y, Z? Why do we accept that not every child will wear the night splints? So we need not to necessarily challenge our physio, but to discuss why. What is the justification? What is your reasoning? What help can I get from you? What agreement can we make in the best interest of my child? So it's not always about challenging, because challenging is a word that suggests another battle. And we don't need any more battles. That is seriously a big issue. We do not need battles in our lives. We have enough. Physio should be about minimizing those battles, not making more. How are we doing for questions? Are we gobsmacked, everybody?
We're looking good. Just a couple of comments. So from Ruth, Max has global delay, so the communication is limited. So what you said before, absolutely apt with that. Tracy said, Marion is honest, but it is still raw, even almost 6 years after diagnosis. And, you know, we hear you, Tracy, with that one. She said, I could do with her being my neighbour. It's more green space up here in Scotland and good property prices if she fancies it. Sorry, Tracy, I've got news. Me and Sam are going to be fighting over Marion to be our neighbours and best friends.
I have to say, I'm not sure where you are. I should know where you are, but I am looking at new properties next week.
Scotland. Tracy's
it's
Scotland.
Not Scotland. It's not Scotland. It's in the Cambridge area where my daughter.
That's near me. I'm St Neots. You're not looking in St Neots, are you?
No, I'm just thinking. My daughter lives in Waterbeach.
Okay, I can get there. So Wednesday.
It has sent me properties in St Neots. In fact, this is a daily occurrence at the moment, but that's besides the point. Mine has to be a dog-friendly house. Basically, nothing in it that's chewable.
I think that's it. Has anybody got any questions? I'm just going to put it on gallery view so I can see. No, I think there's no one's raising their hand.
Does anybody want to disagree with anything I've said?
Oh, here we are. Okay, so I've had a question from. I've got two questions privately here. So, for the wheelchair, you mentioned, Marion, for the wheelchair to bed and back transfers, you suggested the swivel board.
That's the one where you put your feet on something and that turns you round. So
okay.
It's a that goes on the floor. You put your feet on it, and then you can, as long as the child can weight bear, you can either lift them up or swivel them, keeping their feet on that, because that will help you swivel. But it's one, again, a piece of equipment that may not last for many years, but it may be a good enough temporary before getting a hoist or having a hoist installed.
So just to clarify, is that for non-ambulant, or is that for people that are coming off?
For a child who is struggling to get up, rather than lifting them to put them in a wheelchair, that their feet go down, they take some weight, and you swivel them round and sit them down, rather than lifting their whole body weight. So it's
something. Would you get that from the OT, or would you get that from your physio?
You should get that from the OT. Now, what we have to specify, and the idea is, there is a difference between lifting and transferring. So lifting is taking the body weight and moving it somewhere else. Transferring is not necessarily taking the whole body weight. It's actually just transferring from A to B. It could be that their feet are on the floor. It could be on a sliding board. And one of the other reasons that we so like a seat on a wheelchair that goes up and down is it makes transfers standing up much, much easier. So that if your physio is trying to persuade your wheelchair service, or your OT is trying to persuade your wheelchair service that this is an important feature, manual handling, you're protecting your back, making transfers easier, reducing risk, then a raising, lowering seat is essential.
Thank you. Another question that I've had come through. So just as a little aside, I've just shared a link to the previous webinars, Marion, including the first session that we did, which had your audio only, unfortunately, but it was still really valid. So the question from the parent was, what's the best activity to do at home during lockdown to make sure the boys don't put on weight?
This is a really difficult one because the boys are not as active. And ultimately, and it's not the boys, many of us have this boredom factor that seems to have a direct line to the fridge or the sweet cupboard, or where you keep the noshy nibbly bits. And it's a boredom factor. I can't think anything better to do. I'll go and raid the fridge. Let's just go and see what I might fancy to see for lunch. Oh, a pot of olives. Oh, look, there's a biscuit begging to be eaten. And I think it's not a problem just for the boys. The problem is generally, how do we keep them more active? And you'll say, oh, but they do Joe Wicks, which a lot of them don't because it's too complex. Or they're going for a walk every day. We're doing lots of exercise. Actually, what you have to understand about school, we have to get to school. We have to be in school. We move around the classroom. We don't have the opportunity just to have the bag of crisps here and the biscuit there. We don't have the drinks, which may be sugary drinks or fizzy drinks. We just do not have the opportunity to eat. We move around more. We're generally more active. Even in lessons, we will get up and wander around the classroom, go and put a book here, go and pick up a pen from there, which we are not doing in lockdown. So generally, it's about thinking, how do I stay more active? How can I maybe reproduce a classroom situation? So try and get the children to think what they would do, that every 20 minutes they may have to get up and go and put a book over here, or go and get a piece of paper from there or a pencil from here. Think about break times. Think about lunchtime. Lunchtime at home, you walk into the next room. Lunchtime at school, you may have to go down 3 corridors. You may have to go down the end of the corridor for the toilet. You don't just pop in the next room when the toilet's right opposite you, or go up 1 flight of stairs, but it's still not very far. So it's all these little things that are extras at school. Unless your child has been put in a classroom where the toilet is en suite and the lunch hall is next door and the library is the room opposite, you walk around at school. At home, it's all in one room, the kitchen's over there, the toilet's over there. We're not as active at home. We know this from school holidays. We know, and when I say we know, I know because I've been doing it so long, the time when we have most boys struggling with walking in the past has always been from breaking up from school in July to Christmas. That 6-week summer holidays has always been, even if you go away for 2 weeks and they're swimming every day, that period, school holidays, is the period when we're less active. And if the boys are going to struggle with walking, it's going to be that September, October. Plus, it's weather. Now, we have had the most glorious weather during lockdown. That has been a mega bonus. That it hasn't been raining, you haven't been cooped up in the house. Yes, a lot of families have not left the confines of their own garden or been out even in the street, apart from to clap for carers, thank you very much. But you're not going out maybe to the football pitch or the park, but if there's a garden, you need to be out there as you would. You know, half an hour before school starts, you're in the playground with your mates. You're not doing that at home. 20 minutes break time, you're out there in the playground with your mates. You may not be doing that at home. Lunchtime, you're out playing. Evening, you've got to get home from school. So maybe what you need to do to reduce the possibility of them putting on weight is basically reproduce a school day. There's some eyebrows going up, Mrs. We are generally much more active. It's like at work in lockdown. Those of you who are not working during lockdown, are you as active as you would be at work? Even if you sit at a computer all day at work, you still get up to see what the woman next to you is doing on her computer, and you still go to the fridge where the coffee machine is, and you still wander down the corridor to see what your mate's up to. You still are more mobile. You are very, very limited when you work from home. I hate working from home. I know I'm a blob when I work from home. Even like it.
It's true. It's true though, isn't it?
If I go to work, I get up at 5:30 to get to work. When I'm working from home, I get up when the dog gets up, when the dog wants breakfast. You know, I don't have to walk to the station. I don't have to walk from King's Cross Station to Great Ormond Street. There are so many things. Even if I got the bus, which I don't, but if I did, I still have to walk up the steps at King's Cross Station. I still have to get up the steps in the hospital with up 3 flights to get to my office, which I always walk. It's little things people don't think about that you don't do when you're at home. It's all of us. It's not just the boys. Lockdown has had a lot of problems in terms of calorie intake.
Mm. Yeah.
It's all of us. It's all of us.
Yeah. Well, I think there's no further questions. Unless there's anything else you wanted to add, Marion?
Absolutely not. I have got through my little list.
Thank you so much. As always, I'll send out a feedback form tomorrow, guys. It'd be amazing to have your feedback and to let us know how you felt tonight went. We'll see Marion in a fortnight's time. We're just going to
Do we want to discuss now while parents are on what we might do? What we were talking before we came on?
We could do. Yeah, the session number 6 was going to be an open forum, but we've decided that Marion has done something similar for SMA on Sunday, which is where we open up the floor to parents to ask the kids what they want to ask Marion. So basically get questions from your kids.
About physio.
About physio.
And what am I splints for? And why do I have to do my exercises?
Marion, what was the cracking one that that boy asked you?
Does standing up make me poo?
Brilliant. Oh. It's a valid question, really, isn't it?
Absolutely genuine.
And does it make you poo? Is the answer yes?
It depends how much you're standing. For the boys who are really non-ambulant and not doing a lot of standing, there's a lot of guts in here. And if your small intestine is full, it may not work quickly. But if your large intestine, which is the bit where it comes out, is full, then yes, it may be a bit more effective. But just not being squashed up with your tummy squashed up constantly in sitting does allow your guts to expand a bit and get things moving. Exercise helps your digestion for definite.
Okay, so that was a valid question, wasn't it? So
it was a very valid. No question is not a useful question. If it needs an answer, it doesn't matter. It's important.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Marion. Thank you all for joining us. It's been a lovely group this evening. Thank you. And we'll see you in a fortnight.
Lovely. Thanks a lot.